we are going to be covering how to create a chocolate caramel curl technique, okay? I am really, really excited because I know that this class is going to be extremely impactful for you guys. And not only that, we're going to create a beautiful lived-in look for those girls who have curls. As you guys can see, I already have my mannequin beautifully cut and prepped for you guys. So she is going to get a nice transformation today. As you guys can see, we are starting off with a nice natural brown base, level 6. And essentially what we are going to be doing is working with this mannequin's natural base, which is going to be our chocolate. And we are going to add in some caramel highlights utilizing our Blonde Life cream lightener in a balayage formation, okay? The thing that I love about the Blonde Life cream lightener is that it has an amazing consistency for open air painting, but it also gives you up to 9 levels of lift. So with it, you're going to get an amazing lift that's going to keep the hair healthy and hydrated, but also give you a beautiful lift that's on tone, okay? We'll also be working with LumiShine 10 volume developer today. Normally, if you guys have been in a class with me, you guys know my favorite is 5, but today we're taking it up a notch with 10 because we want to make sure that we get a nice, beautiful, clean lift in a short amount of time, especially since we're going to be open air processing. So we are going to do that breakdown. I'll talk to you guys about some toning in just a second, but first and foremost, let's prep this hair and get some hands in it, okay? One thing that I love to do when I am first starting out is, number 1, making sure to just run my fingers through the natural curl. Typically, I would tell you not to detangle the natural curl, but I'm just taking my fingers and I'm just running my fingers through to begin to separate those curls, just in case there are any areas that are tangled that need to be worked out. And so I like to just take my fingers and separate those curls. As you guys can see, that last one, there was a little tangle on those ends. And so when you're working with curls, I love to work with them in their natural state when I am doing this particular technique. I like a look that's really lived in, and I love to be able to blend in the natural base instead of going in to do a full transformation from scalp to ends. We are going to surface paint and paint those highlights in, okay? Really quick, where are you guys from? Tell me where you guys are from, what area you guys are from. We have Sydney on the camera today who's going to be able to capture some shots for us. And so, Sydney, if you can, just while I grab some gloves, zoom in on this product and tell me where everybody is from today.
We got the UK.
Yes. We got UK.
2 UKs.
Oh, we got 2 people in the UK?
2 UKs.
Uh-oh. All right, guys. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So as you guys see, I like to keep my station nice and prepped. I really like to make sure I have everything that I need right here in my space. Before I start any color process, I always start with my Defy Damage Pro Series 1. If you guys are not familiar with Defy Damage is going to be your #1 resource and tool in your arsenal to keep the bonds of your curly hair protected, okay? And so when I am applying my Defy Damage, I like to shake the can and spray in short downward bursts. As you guys can see, I already used my fingers to go in and separate those curls just a bit. And so now I'm just taking those sections and I am going through utilizing my Defy Damage Pro Series 1 to spray and protect the bonds of the hair. This is especially important when you're dealing with curls because curls can be extremely fragile. You want to make sure that you're being mindful of protecting those natural curls. And so your bond protecting spray is always going to be your first step. The great thing about Defy Damage is that it's super quick in your application time, but also it's going to help to prepare the hair strand for the color. If you guys have never used it before, what you'll notice is that when you start to apply your Defy Damage to the hair, it really helps to smooth out the cuticle of the hair and give the hair a nice, smooth, clean canvas to work on and apply your color to. I love it because it really does help to keep the hair strong throughout the lightening process, and you don't have to change your formula, alter anything. All you're doing is spraying this directly onto the hair before you start your color process, so you are already starting to protect the hair before you do anything. So, Defy Damage is always going to be your first step. Now, one thing that I also like to do when I'm working with my cream lightener is I like to weigh it out. And so I will typically make sure, number one, make sure the tab is off of there. This is brand spanking new. I literally keep Blind Life Cream Lightener all the time, guys. So if you are not a fan, I promise after today's class, you're going to love it. Because our Blind Life Cream Lightener has natural oils in it, I like to just make sure that my cream lightener is mixed up fairly well. Sometimes when you're letting it sit on the shelf, it'll settle to the bottom, but I love to be able to just make sure I'm getting all of those oils in there, mixed and emulsified very well. And so when I am utilizing my Blind Life Cream Lightener, I love to take my scale and I weigh it out so that I can make sure that I get the most accurate measurement. When you are using your Blind Life Cream Lightener, your mixing ratio is going to be 1 to 2. So that's going to be 1 ounce. For every 1 ounce of cream lightener that you're using or mixing, you're going to do 2 ounces of developer. So I always like to start with the 2 ounce mark because I feel like that typically gives me a really good consistency and also a nice amount for what I'm going to be doing today. Since we're going to be doing surface painting and I'm going to be using 10 volume developer, I typically will do that 1 to 2 mixing ratio. That's what's recommended, but you don't have to stick with just 1 to 2. You could also do 1 to 1.5. So if you're doing a 2 ounce mixing ratio, you could do 1.5 ounces of developer to that mixing ratio if you want your consistency to be a little thicker and creamier, but that also will make your lightener a little stronger. So just be mindful of that. You'll get the best mixing ratio if you are doing a 1 to 2. And so I'm going to add 4 ounces of developer. I went a little bit over, about 2 little baby ounces, but I like to do that because again, it really helps to make sure that you stay consistent with your mixing. Some people, when they are mixing their lightener, prefer to use different methods. Some people like to use spatulas. Some people like to use a whisk. I'm a huge fan of using a brush because that guarantees that I'm going to get everything mixed in without whipping my lightener too much. Sometimes what will happen when you begin to mix and you're using items like whisks and things of that nature, you can whip in too much air, which begins to cause oxidization to happen in your mix, but also that can cause your lightener to swell. So I always suggest to make sure that you're just mindful when you're mixing with cream lightener. I like to push it around until I get everything nice and smooth. And the thing that you will be surprised by is what this consistency ends up looking like. Although this is a 1 to 2 mixing ratio, you guys will see as I continue to mix, this mix will get thicker and thicker until it gets almost creamy like melted cream cheese. So when you get to that consistency, if it's still pretty liquidy, you want to keep mixing. And you'll see it'll eventually smooth out. And once it smooths out and settles, it'll get a lot thicker and a lot creamier. Now, what I'll also be doing today, while I let this finish, I'm going to set that to the side. I like to work off of my sections and how the natural hair lives, okay? As you guys can see, she has a nice round cut. And so because of the fact that there is layering and roundness in the cut, I'm going to start off in the nape. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with my sections in the nape, okay? So I like to take my tail comb. You could, if you want to get really specific with your parting, you could definitely work with quadrants. I normally am a quadrant type of girl, but today we are just going to work with 3 sections. And the reason why is because I don't want to disturb the natural way that the hair flows by breaking it up into multiple quadrants. I know that a lot of the time quadrants seem the most neat, but because we are going to be doing this technique with the curls lived in, I want to make sure that these sections stay nice and clean, but still honor the way that the natural curl lives. So essentially, we're going to be working with these 3 quadrants. So I literally just took a slice behind the ear, came up to a point, second slice behind the ear, came up to another point, and we're going to work in these 3 sections. I'm going to start in the back section, and then I'm going to move my way up to the front, because we're going to be doing a lot of surface painting, and we're going to be working with the natural curl. Essentially, we will be doing a balayage type effect with the way that these curls live, but what I want you guys to be mindful of and pay attention to is what hair is on the surface and how we are going to see this color as it rests. So I'm going to lift up this first section, and as you guys can see, I'm not really combing through the curls. I'm actually just moving them the way that they live. And I want to keep those curls nice and separated because I want them to flow. When I relax these sections, I want them to drop how they already are. Does anybody have any questions so far? If you guys have questions, please feel free to drop those in the comments. Sydney will make sure that I do not miss any of you guys' questions, and I want to make sure that I answer any questions that you guys have. So what I'll be doing, I'm going to be doing a balayage effect, but I don't like to use a board when I'm doing balayage. I like to use my hands. It's much easier, and if you guys have ever taken a balayage class with me, y'all know I love to use my hands. It keeps me nice and clean, keeps my sections clean, and it keeps things from getting super messy. So I'm going to take my lightener. Remember what I said, guys, it done thickened up already. So I'm going to take a little bit of my lightener, and I like a nice smooth consistency. So I am going to take a little bit of lightener. I'm going to put it on the back of my hand. Now, if you guys have ever taken a class with me on balayage, y'all know I like to use 2 brushes. I like to keep one in the bowl, which I call my dirty brush, which is going to be the product brush I'll use to scoop out my lightener and put it on the back of my hand. And then I'm going to have my painting brush, which I'm going to use to actually apply the lightener to the hair. And so what I want you guys to notice is when you are dissecting and trying to figure out where you are going to place your highlights, look and see how the curls are living already, okay? I want to make sure that I am exposing the most natural curls, and I'm going to take sections out. You literally can do this fairly quickly and fairly easy. I'm still utilizing the same techniques I would for a true balayage section, and I am painting on the surface of these curls. And what you'll notice is even though this hair is curly and it wants to revert back into its natural curl, I'm pulling it so there's tension on my section, and so that that curl does not immediately go back to its natural form. And I'm going to drop that curl. And so I'm going to continue, even as I am pulling curls out, I'm going to find the curls that already sit out among the rest of them. And so I am looking to see where those curls are and how I can pull them out and highlight them. And so the great thing about this technique is, number one, it's going to look super, super blended and very, very natural because of the fact that I am literally going in and pulling out the curls that are already going to have the most movement to them. If they are already sitting on the exterior of the hair, they are going to stand out from everything else. And so I like to take those curls, and those are the ones that I like to lighten. And so even as I am working through my sections, I'm picking out the curls that stand out. You can take bigger sections because of the fact that we're working with curls. And when it comes to curls, you want to make sure that you take enough of a section that when you paint on the top of it, it's going to actually show up and not diffuse into the hair. So as you guys can see, I'm literally just taking my brush, softly painting as if I'm doing a traditional balayage. And I am literally making sure to cover and completely saturate that section. Once you get to a point, and you guys can see even now that curl is naturally wanting to come back and return to its regular form, you are going to continue to place your highlights. And if you guys are worried about a transfer, it's totally fine because of the fact that these are curls and we are looking to add pops of highlights where we want to see them. It's okay if you have some sections that do get highlighted. It's going to look very, very surface level versus having to be extremely neat and clean and very precise because you're dealing with curl. Most of this color that I'm doing at the moment is going to soften and diffuse just as much as I'm painting. So this is why I like to use bigger sections when I am doing balayage on curls. And again, guys, I'm just essentially looking for the areas that already stand out. I'm looking to see where those curls are that are already sitting out amongst the rest. Most of them are on the surface, and as you guys can see, this section is like a small triangle, and I am painting both sides. And so I'm literally going in and I am making sure to lighten nice and heavy and paint nice and heavy on both sides of this section because I want to get good saturation. And when you are working with curl, you want to make sure to surround the full hair shaft. Any area where you don't surround the hair shaft, you will see what we like to call holidays, and it'll look like a blotchy spot where the lightener did not penetrate well and did not process well. Now, even as I am going through this section, you might think, okay, that's a nice big section. There's going to be a lot of dark hair underneath. If you think about it from the standpoint of how you guys just saw this mannequin and how her hair was styled, this hair on the interior is going to spread out and diffuse because her hair is curly. This hair underneath in the back is probably not going to be shown. When you think about somebody with smooth hair, their face frame or money piece is typically in the front of their face. But for someone with curl, their face frame or highlighted portions are in the crown and sitting on the surface on the outside of their hair. And so I'm going to work from the interior out so that I can make sure that I'm able to get a nice blended and diffused look all the way through. And what's so crazy, guys, if you take a look at this section, this was the last section that I did. It's already lifting. And so something that I like to do when I am working through my sections, I like to go back and make sure that it's completely saturated. If I see the ends and they are not completely saturated or the surface of that hair is not completely saturated, I go back through and I make sure that I tap those ends. It's another important part of getting a good balayage application because of the fact that you are working with curls. Even though you are seeing a lot of hair, a lot of density, you still want to make sure that you have great saturation so that you can make sure that that hair is covered completely. And so my next section, I'm just going to drop it down so you guys can see. If I spread out the hair, what I'm going to be looking for is to go in between my previous highlights underneath that section. So you will be able to see, once this all softens and diffuses and blends out, there will be a nice array of highlights all the way through. But so when I am choosing on my next section, I'm looking for the hair that is underneath, and I want to see where it's lying, because then I'm going to choose my highlights in between those. So if you are looking to create what we call highlights, lowlights, or dimension, you want to make sure that where your lighten sections are, you have some depth or some darker pieces that flow over the top of those. They make your highlights pop, okay? So I'm going to follow the exact same application style that I did. A little bit of lightener on the back of my hand. And I'm going to take the tail of my comb. I'm sorry, not tail of my comb, tail of my brush. And I'm going to grab out a section of curls. And I'm just going to take my 2 fingers and smooth that section out as much as possible. Remember, I said with your Defy Damage Protective spray as your first spray or as your first application, you literally are going to have the most smooth application. And even for this to be curly hair, this hair actually smooths out very well. And that is because of our Defy Damage Pro Series 1. So I am following the same application style. And like I said a little earlier, guys, the great thing about curls is that curls are extremely forgiving, especially in the fact that these curl sections are going to diffuse and blend in. So even though I'm going really heavy in my slice or my sections that I'm taking, these are going to give the most beautiful blended look. So now I'm going to work on sections in between. And I like to just make sure to leave out a little bit of hair in between those 2 sections, because again, I want some of that depth to sit on top of those highlights. And so I'm just going to section out those curls. As you guys can see, I'm using the tail of my comb just to pick up ringlets. I'm not really looking to create a super strict or specific slice weave technique. I'm actually looking to just create almost a slight triangular section or a square section as I'm taking them out. But what I'm looking for are ringlets that are already sitting out above everything else. And as you can see, I'm taking my brush. I have it sideways or parallel to the hair, and I'm literally just using that to spread my lightener onto the hair. If you guys have seen balayage techniques, most of the application styles are fairly similar. You can switch up your application style based on the look that you're looking for. So a lot of people will opt for peaks and valleys or V's, but because we are doing curly hair, we're doing full saturated sections all the way through. And when you are dealing with balayage, what that means is you want a section that is completely saturated. And so when you are painting on the surface of the hair, you want to make sure that that is fully covered. And so if you guys look at this section right here, there's still some dark hair right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush and just lightly cover that section. I want to make sure that I have as much saturation as possible. Something else that you guys will notice when you start to do these types of applications is when you are working in your salon space, you want to be mindful of the temperature in your space. The reason why I say that is because we're open air processing. We are not going to put this in foils. She's not going to go under any external heat or anything of that nature, because we are dealing with a lightener that is considered a power lightener, meaning you're going to get up to 9 levels of lift with this lightener. Now, because we are painting on the surface of the hair and we have this hair exposed to the elements, meaning the temperature of the room, this hair is going to process slightly slower because it is cool in my room right now. But you guys already saw that last section, or my first section, I'll say, was already starting to change. And that's because this lightener is what we call a power lightener. It is meant to give you that 9 levels of lift, or 9+ actually, meant to give you that 9+ levels of lift, regardless of what developer you use. So when you are utilizing a lightener like Blonde Life, you want to make sure to be mindful of the temperature in your salon space. Make sure that if you are looking to get that high lift, that you keep your room nice and comfortable, nice and warm. You don't have to turn on a heater or anything if you don't want to, but something that I tend to do, especially if I'm doing like open air processing, I'll just ask my salon sisters to turn the heat down or the air down so that way it's not freezing in my room, because that tends to slow down my processing time. So I always like to just try to make sure that the temperature in my salon space is nice and comfortable for my client. If they are cold, it's probably too cold. So I check with them to make sure that they're comfortable. And as you guys can see, these are literally like single strand lights. But because of the fact that these sections are wider, these are wider sections, and they are what we would consider chunkier highlights. These are going to soften and spread out. And as you guys can see already, remember I said we're going to leave a little bit of depth above the previous highlight. And so when this highlight sits up against this dark dimensional piece, it's going to really pop as it softens and diffuses. And now, one thing I also want to talk about is when you are planning to do an application like this, you want to make sure that you prep your clients properly, especially if you are dealing with someone who wears their hair curly most of the time. What I suggest is to have them come in for a prep appointment. And what that means is you literally have them come in to have their hair lightened. I'm sorry, not lightened, but treated beforehand. And what I like to do, I will have my client come in for a prep appointment. And during her prep appointment, I will shampoo her hair with a clarifying shampoo to make sure that I'm able to remove any buildup from the hair. If there's any product buildup on the hair, it's going to slow down that lightener process. So make sure to be mindful of that. I like to tell my clients after their prep appointment, try not to put any heavy products on the hair. No heavy oils, no heavy butters, things of that nature can really affect how much your lightener is able to lift and how it's going to process. So I like to do a prep appointment a couple of days before their actual color appointment, because that's a great way to make sure that you cover your bases. And I will normally see how their curls respond at that prep appointment. I'll do a clarifying shampoo to get any product off. I'll do a hydrating shampoo. And I will make sure that before they leave, I see, number one, if their curls are responding properly to moisture, if they are dry, if they have any breakage, any damage, or anything like that, I'll tackle that issue at their prep appointment before I even start their hair. So that way I can make sure that their curls and their color is going to look the most beautiful after I'm finished with it. I do not want their hair to look damaged when I'm done. I want it to look healthy. I want it to look beautiful, bright. So I like to make sure that I take my time in those prep appointments to explain to my clients what the best option for them is and how to properly treat their hair before we start. Does anybody have any questions as we are working through our sections? Something that I like to do in preparation as well is I like to do what I call a blow dry treat and trim for my natural curly clients. Sometimes for curls, most of the time they are wearing their hair curly all the time. If they get their hair trimmed, it may be in its curly state, but most of the time they don't get a true precision trim, meaning we are actually going and stretching that hair and blowing it out to get a good clean trim. Some people prefer to only get their hair cut curly, and that's fine. But there are times when you need to be sure to stretch that hair and get a good precision trim, so you can make sure you get any points of split ends or breakage or damage. So I like to do in that prep appointment from time to time, if that person has not had a trim in over 3 to 6 months, I love to be able to take them, shampoo that hair, blow it out really good, or stretch it out with my blow dryer, and I will literally do a trim on their hair stretched out. So that way I can make sure that they have a really good trim. I can make sure that the hair is properly detangled and conditioned. So that way when they come in for their color, we're not coloring over hair that is previously damaged. And really quick, guys, you can see how we are already starting a pattern. You see how even through this dark hair, you can still see those highlights. And these are actually nice thick slices. So when these soften and blend back out, oh my goodness, it is going to be so pretty. It's going to be like a bouquet of flowers. So now I dropped my last section down in the back.
What technique is this called? Someone wants to know.
It is it's a curlyage. And so it's a balayage technique on curly hair. And so you're doing the same process that you would do on somebody who has smooth, sleek, straight hair, but you're going to take it and you're going to do it on curly hair so that it's lived in and it's natural. If that person, this is great for clients who are not apt to wearing their hair straight or smooth or blown out. If they prefer to wear their curls all of the time, this is a great way to be able to give them color without disturbing their natural curl. And so I love to do this for people who primarily wear their hair curly, but they like to wear their color as well. And this is one of the best ways to be able to really truly see where your highlights are going to be so that they don't disappear, especially if you're doing them in foils. I love a good foil full highlight, but there are times where when you are dealing with curls, those highlights can disappear. If you're not careful, those highlights will disappear, okay? You can be working diligently to do a crazy, beautiful, precise highlight, but then once you diffuse that hair and those curls take over, those beautiful highlights can sometimes disappear. And so as frustrating as that can be, it's very common. And so I like to sometimes offer this service instead of your traditional highlight, because I don't want to have my client feel like, well, what did I pay for? I came in and I got all these highlights and you were working on my hair for hours, but there's nothing in there. And sometimes that happens. So this is a great way to be able to create that beautiful, full dimensional look without having to work so hard and your client feeling like they didn't get anything done. And as you guys can see, even as I'm working through my section, I'm going to take that hair and I'm going to smooth it all the way to the bottom so I can make sure that that section is fully saturated.
And why do you use your hand again?
Why do I use my hand? Honestly, it's quicker and it's easier. Some people like to use a board, a balayage board. I personally prefer my hand because it's quicker and easier. And honestly, it's less mess. When I am working with my hands, I'm able to direct where everything goes. And because I've gotten so used to working with my own hands versus a balayage board, I'll be honest, I have dropped several balayage boards because trying to hold the board and the hair and my brush and keep everything nice and neat, it can be a challenge. So I love to use my hand for that reason. That was a really good question. And I literally just paint my product on my hand as I go. And it just gives me a nice, clean, quick, easy application where I don't have to worry about creating a mess. And one thing I would suggest, guys, if you're going to try this technique with your hand, get some long gloves. get you some midnight mitts, because I'll be honest, I tried this technique with my regular gloves and I burned my wrist to smithereens. So if you guys are going to try the technique with your hands, I would definitely suggest get you some midnight mitts that come all the way up because as y'all can see, I've already got lightener up to where my watch would be. And yeah, no, nobody has time for that. Now guys, if it happens to where you are getting ready to drop a section down and you feel like lightener gets caught up in there, just make sure to pull that lightener off with your hands, because you don't want it to look blotchy, but just make sure to pull that lightener off with your hands. As you guys can see, I'm still kind of following the same type of application style, and I'm just dropping those sections down slightly on top of each other, but I'm still making sure to get full saturation. If I see a section right here, as you guys can see, you see how that looks dark? I'm going to go back with my brush, take my hand, and I'm just going to lay that product right over the top of it. You just want to make sure that you do get that hair saturated fully. Wherever you still see dark hair, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to lift as cleanly and evenly as you want. So just be mindful of that when you guys are doing this service, that you want to give as much saturation as you possibly can so that the hair can really, really lift. And so we're going to bring it on around to our next section. And what I'm going to do here, because this is the very bottom section, I'm going to do just like I did for the first 2 sections. I'm going to leave hair out in between. And I'm just going to take a couple slices. I'm going to pull out the ones that are already standing out. And I'm going to go ahead and lighten those. The reason why I say to pull out the ones that are already standing out is because those are the curls that typically already have light reflecting off of them. So when you highlight those curls and the light bounces off of them, because they are already sitting on the exterior of the hair, or they stand out more than the rest, they're really going to pop against that dark natural base. And because of the fact that we're dealing with curls, again, we're going to be able to see these thicker sections expand out, and it's going to create the most beautiful blended look. So what I would suggest is to make sure that as you are going through your sections, look and see what it looks like. Sometimes you might want to take a step back from the process, because sometimes we can get so caught up in looking at the hair as we are working. Take a minute and take a step back from the section and see what it looks like. See where you see light and dark. Is it balanced? Do you need to add a couple more highlights in some sections? I'm very big on symmetry when I'm doing balayage techniques, so I like to create balance. Although I do have situations where I am working through the hair and I'm looking to get more light or more dark in certain areas, I still like to see a nice balance. So even as I'm looking at this section, there is a nice amount of dark, then I have my light, dark, light, dark. And even as this section transitions into the back section, there's dark hair in between, a light underneath, and a light here. So it gives you a beautiful balance. So when this hair all blends out, it's going to have a good look and it's going to be perfect. So look for that sometimes when you are working. Take a step back from your section and see what it looks like. One other thing that you guys will notice is as I am working through the hair, I am still working with diagonal sectioning. And so even though this isn't a full diagonal, this line is following a diagonal pattern because I still want to see diffusion. And so when you are working with curls, my big suggestion always is to work around the shape of the head. Work with the shape of the head. I like to connect my sections in circular motions as much as I can, which is why I like to work on diagonal partings and sectioning, because it creates a lot more softness and also roundness in the way that your highlights and lowlights will soften out once you detangle the hair. And the thing that I love the most about doing this technique this way is that it's super quick and easy. Normally, when I'm working through the hair, I like to do slower or lower and slower lightening processes. So that's why I love to use 5 volume typically. But because we're doing open air processing, I'm not looking to let this process all day. Plus, inside of my salon, it's fairly chilly right now because it's summer here. And so I'm going to work smarter and not harder, especially because I know this hair is going to lift fairly quickly. As you guys could see from my previous sections, these are already starting to lift. And even though I am working with curls, those curls are still there. That is the power of your Defy Damage and your Blonde Life cream lightener. That's one of the reasons why this is probably one of my all-time favorite lighteners to use with curl. And Sydney's going to show you guys again that Blonde Life cream lightener. Again, that gives you up to 9 levels of lift. And we are working with 10 volume developer today, which is going to get you that 9+ levels of lift still. But it's also going to give you a quick but slower lift. So normally when I'm processing hair or I'm lightening with 5 to 10 volume developer, I expect the hair to be lifted within about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the starting level. This mannequin is starting at about level 6, so I anticipate that her hair will be lifted fairly quickly. And so I just like to work with the natural base as well and not work against it. I like to use the natural base as my low light instead of painting in a low light, mainly because I love to see that more natural blended look. As you guys know, we're getting ready to go into fall shortly. And so with fall coming, a lot of people are getting ready to start toning their hair down. A lot of your blondes are probably going to go a little warmer, unless they are like a super full-time platinum. A lot of your blondes are going to probably start getting ready to go a little warmer. So techniques like these are perfect when you are dealing with darker levels of hair, or even some of your cooler brunettes. Those are the people who are going to be ready for services like this because it's soft and subtle, but you'll still have some high impact highlighting, especially for those who are curly. They are looking for the opportunity to be able to get some color without feeling fearful of compromising their curl. And so I love doing techniques that are a little more natural and a little more lived in so that they can have some fun too. And again, it's a great way to introduce those who have not had color and those who do, and they are looking for a simpler or even a more natural look. This is a great way to introduce them to that and transition them to fall. As you can see, I'm just moving the hair around because I want to see where everything is going. I want to see where those curls are falling and where they're going to live. I'm just using my fingers to go through and detangle that section. Putting some lightener on the back of my hand. And one thing you guys will notice that I'm also doing as I'm working through my sections, normally I would have extreme tension on this section to try to keep everything nice and neat. I'm going to have tension, but I don't want to pull the curls so much that it stretches completely, especially while you're in the lightening process. Something that you guys will learn as you begin to venture into more curl work is that with curls, there is memory. Those curls have memory. Our hair has memory. It remembers if it's been in a stretched position for a long time, it's typically going to stay in that stretched position. And so if you are wearing your hair straight all the time, your hair is probably going to stay straight, which is where people talk about what we call heat damage as it pertains to curls.
Will this video be saved?
Absolutely, this video will be saved. You guys will be able to watch it back on the Joyco Facebook page. Thank you for asking that question. So yes, you guys want to make sure that you're mindful of how you are applying your product, your lightener, and all of that to curly hair, because it does have memory. And so if you get your hair used to, or your client's hair used to being stretched and straight and all of that, it's going to form that way. You'll start to see where those curls will eventually start to break down and they're not going to revert back to that natural curl. And you don't want that, because at that point, now you have another issue on your hands as it pertains to the health of the curl. So if you start to notice when you're doing certain services, whether it's lightener, whether it's permanent color, whether it's heat styling, if you start to notice that the curls aren't quite bouncing back how they normally do, you might need to change your method. You might need to change what you're doing and how you're doing it for the sake of the health of their hair. A lot of times people will say, we call it shrinkage. A lot of people talk about shrinkage and how curls can sometimes shrink up, but that's truly the strength of your hair. When your curls spring back into their natural curly state, that's a beautiful thing, because that means that your hair is healthy and those curls are nice and strong. That's how you know you have a resilient curl. So now I'm going to let this down. We're going to spread the hair out. Again, guys, I'm keeping it nice and simple. I'm just spreading out my sections because I want to see where everything is going to live. Our model here has a nice little bang, so we are going to hit a couple pieces in the bang. We're not going to go super crazy. We want to keep it nice and light. I actually would love to do maybe like a tip out. And if you guys are not familiar with what tipping out is, it's when you have foils and hair left out and you just hit the very ends or the tips of the section. It's a great way to create a really natural soft highlight without it being a full highlight, especially because it's a bang. I don't want that, or fringe bang, whatever you like to call it. I don't want that to look stripy. And so I like to go for a more natural feel. So when I am up in my crown section, this is literally what I like to call the halo. This is where you would consider your money piece for a curly person. So I like to focus a lot of my placement here and make sure it's strategic, okay? I even sometimes will leave this out till the very, very end, but today, for time's sake, we're gonna go ahead and hit those sections. But what I like to do, as you guys can see underneath this section, you can see through where my highlighted sections are. I went all the way up to the root because I want this to be very bold and bright. But on these top sections, what I like to do is I like to hit from mid to end. I don't go all the way up to the root because I don't want it to look stripy. This is where you're able to go in and create what looks like a shadow root by leaving that root slightly stretched. So instead of going all the way to the root, we're going to blend it up and then blend down. And the reason why I like to blend up, if you guys have ever taken a class with me, this is a great way to make sure that your product is evenly distributed and that it's nice and heavy all the way up to where your lightener is going to stop. And so I love to do that blend down and blend up because it gives a softness and it makes sure that that saturation is good all the way to the top. Actually, let's look at this section right up under it. You guys can see, even here, where I blended that lightener up and then brought it down, the hair is lifting nice and smooth, nice and even here because of the fact that I blended that lightener up. So it's not going to have that orange stripe because it's white. It's completely covered and saturated. All right, guys. So as we are working through, I have a couple more sections up in the crown. I'm still working off of my same sectioning. And I'm going to continue to smooth this section out. And something that I'm going to start to do is I like to, as I'm working through my sections, I like to elevate it and then bring it down. Because what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm getting tension on the section, but I also want to make sure that I'm hitting the actual surface of the hair. Sometimes when you're working in the top of a section, it's easy to over direct the hair and you feel like this might be the surface. No, This is the surface because this is where this hair is going to actually lay. So I like to over direct it first. Not too much because you don't want the bottom to buckle. I over direct and then I pull it the opposite direction. And I'm just going to take my brush just like I did the last time. I would say if you're going to put any tension on your section, this is going to be where you want to make sure that you're mindful. And I'm just going to brush that up. And I'm going to do full saturation through the mids and ends. And I'm going to drop that section down. We are almost done. So I'm just want to see where this is going to live. I don't want to put, you guys see right here where this section seems like there's a lot of dark. This is where I want you guys to make sure that you're paying attention and taking a step back from your sections to see what it looks like. If you look at this from a far back angle, it looks like, I could probably put a highlight right here. But pay attention to your placement of the last section. If I was to place a highlight right here, this section is probably going to split and fall over that. And so I want this dark underneath because I want to make sure that it actually pops against this depth underneath the section. So don't be fooled by when you see darker sections and feel like you have to over highlight or over saturate your sections. You don't want to do that. You want to do just enough. So we're looking at this fringe section and I'm just looking at how the hair falls. I'm literally going to grab a couple of pieces and just tip out the ends. I don't want to take it up too high. I really just want to come through and grab a couple of sections that are highlighted. And now this is a fringe, so some of those shorter pieces will start to run away. If they do, let them go. It's totally fine. I'm gonna drag that down because I want that softness. I'm gonna drop that section down. I'm gonna pull that fringe back over the top. Let's see what we have. We have a couple of short pieces that are popping out. Some that are slightly longer than the rest. So I'm just gonna grab those. And I'm literally grabbing small strands. Not too crazy. I want this to almost look sun-kissed. So I'm just gonna grab a couple more just to see how they pop out. Got one. Literally, guys, you'll see as I'm moving the hair around, they'll pop, the strands will pop out on their own. You literally are able to see how they'll pop out. And guys, I'm taking smaller sections here in the fringe because I don't want those to get super saturated. I don't want them to be really, really heavy. I want them to be nice and natural looking. I want them to look extremely natural, almost sun-kissed. So I'm just grabbing those very small strands and I'm just hitting them with some lightener.
So I said, thank you so much. Very helpful.
Of course.
That was Linda.
Thanks, Linda. So I'm just looking to see where there might be a strand or two. Oh, this is a good one. So guys, as you see, this is a shorter piece, but it's sitting right on top of a dark section in between two highlights. So this is a perfect section to just grab and do a very light tip out. You don't have to do anything too crazy because remember, this is a fringe. We're not looking for stripes. We're not looking for full saturation highlights. You're almost looking to give a subtle kiss to some dark hair. I'm just pulling that section down so I can make sure that I get it good. And we're gonna let that go. So now we are going to move into our last quadrant, okay? Same process is going to be, but look at this, guys. Look how much this has lifted in just a short amount of time. We've literally been on here, what, 40 minutes or so?
An hour.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, cool. We're down to our last hour, last 5 minutes. Okay, well then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to jump really quick into our toner and what we're gonna use, because I want you guys to actually be able to see that as well. And you guys will also get to see the finished product. I'm gonna let Sydney zoom in really quick on our model. And so you guys see in just an hour how much lift we've gotten. Look how beautiful that is. And so once this hair diffuses and softens, we are going to have a very, very beautiful natural lived-in highlight. It is not going to look stripy like it's looking in this moment. It's actually going to give a beautiful, soft, blended look, because those sections will all begin to blend into each other. So I'm going to let her rest while I show you guys what we are going to be using to tone. What I like to do when I am toning, I like to choose my toner based on the look that I'm going for. And so today, we're going to be using one of my all-time favorites. Like, this is probably one of my favorite products right now ever. It is the 8VG Violet Gold in the LumiShine Liquid Demis. This is going to be mixed with 5 volume developer. It is very sheer in the way that it deposits into the hair, but the tonality is nothing like sheer. It is actually a beautiful final tone of violet with a hint of gold. And so what that does is, I know people are thinking like violet, gold, that's purple and yellow. Don't they balance each other out? But the thing about doing a tone like this one is that with the violet tone, even though it is going to begin to neutralize some of the yellow in the hair, the gold itself is going to keep the hair beautifully bright and vibrant. And so I love this one because when you are dealing with open air processing, typically when you're lifting through those dark natural levels, because you don't have a foil or anything in it to help that hair to lift really high, you typically will end up landing at warmer natural levels or warmer underlying pigments. So I like to have some neutralizing action, but I still want it to be bright and vibrant. So this is one of my all-time favorites. This is what we're going to be using to tone today. And I'm going to allow the hair to lift through that banana yellow, almost level 9. And then we're going to tone down with our 8VG Violet Gold. That's going to be mixed with our 5 volume developer. And we're going to finish out our model. But before we do, just a quick recap. We are doing a chocolate caramel balayage, and these are on curls. This is going to be the most beautiful transformation because we're leaving the natural base. So that is going to be our depth. We've went through and we've hand painted all of our highlights in. We use nice thicker sections. I like to take out about a 1/4 inch to really truly a 1/2 inch of a weave. And we just section those little curls out as they pop out of the hair. We want to make sure that we leave some depth and dimension in between our sections. So our dark natural base is going to be left out in between. And we're just going to continue this pattern all the way through the round of the head. And once we are finished, we're going to tone with our 8VG Violet Gold in our LumiShine Liquid Demi with 5 volume developer. Your processing time for this will probably be about 10 minutes. And once you are done, you can style with your Curl Confidence by Joico. And I absolutely love this finish. I've used this technique on tons and tons of clients. So as you guys see, you will get to see the finished product once we get off of here. Make sure to check out the Joico Facebook page for the replay of today's class. And if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the comments. I will make sure to go back and answer any questions that you guys have if I might have missed them. But I just want to thank you guys for today. Thank you for sticking around with me from beginning to end. And I hope you guys come back to see the final result once we are finished.